Hey guys, I wanted to share with you a review of The Good and the Beautiful, their new edition, Level Language Arts. I was lucky enough to be able to be in there to use it this past year as I piloted their new version. And I just wanted to share with you our experience using it so you'd have a good idea of what to expect from this curriculum. Also, it might be helpful for you if you're trying to decide, should I stick with the old version or should I transfer into the new one? I'm hoping that this review will help you decide what you should do. So first of all, let me explain some of the differences in the old versus the new. And I have to apologize, I took off the binding of these, so they're kind of just loose leaf papers. But this is the old previous version of The Good and the Beautiful Language Arts. And this is a few pages of the new current one. So one major difference between the old and the new is that the old use these phonics cards. So you would practice these phonics cards, and there was no, sometimes it would say in the book, practice your phonics cards, and that was it. In the new current version, you're going to be using these reading booster cards. They will focus on specific phonic sounds, and along with that, this down here will tell you when you should read these booster books. There are 20 of these booster books, which leads us into the next difference. In the previous version, you used this reader, and it would tell you when to read what story in the course book. In the new edition, Language Arts, these books are read according to the booster cards. So when you finish reading, like let's say this, it tells you down here which book to read. So you go and read it. So the course book and the booster cards can be used separately from each other because they don't really tell you what to read in the course book. So those are two major differences between the new and the old. So another difference is the spelling. There are only 3 units in the new The Good and the Beautiful Language Arts. It says down here, it has it green and yellow, and you will use these in, let's say, Unit 2. And then it has these spelling ideas. There's kinesthetic, auditory, and visual. And there's ideas in there of what maybe you should do for each of those. So it's really much more helpful in the spelling. My son just really enjoyed it a lot more. I wouldn't say necessarily that the new version is easier than the previous version. There is just more to it. For example, there's more geography. There's more phonics principles taught. There's more phonemic awareness. There's just more in it than there are in the previous version. Also, the reading is maybe a little bit more advanced in the old version. However, I did copy the previous version's level assessment into a grammar program, and then I did the 2022 edition in a grammar program, the end of level assessment, and both of them were grade 2. One was a couple of months advanced, according to this grammar app. That the previous one was a couple months more advanced than the current 2022 edition, but it really wasn't that big of a difference. So if you're thinking that this is going to be way too easy, I don't think it's going to be as easy as you think it is. It's more all-encompassing, is what it is. So I'm going to flip the camera around and I'm going to show you a lesson-to-lesson comparison of both of these. And I think you're going to see, at least this is what I see, is that the previous version is more challenging. Now that's not necessarily a good thing in my opinion. There's challenging and then there's not age-appropriate challenging. And I feel like the previous version had some things in there that was not necessarily age-appropriate. So I'm going to flip it around so you can see the difference. So I wanted to show you a difference between lessons. Remember, this is the pilot version. So in the version you can get now, It won't have these spots. Mine just wasn't completely finished when I started using it, but this is the only copy I have right now. So we're going to start with lesson 60, spelling words with AI. This is how the lesson goes about it here. They use the Spelling Tiles app. You practice your booster cards and books, and then you're going to go watch this video of that book. And then here is the independent practice. They're going to have you do reading practice and then practice spelling some words that you've been working on in previous lessons. And then these have some of your spelling words in it. And then spot the syllables. And that is spelling words with AI. In the previous version, this would have been your lesson. So AI part 1, you read all these words. You're going to talk about the picture. You're going to have them dictate, which means you're going to read the word and have them spell it without looking at it. They need to go through these. So this is part 1. And then part 2 is this. And then they're going to read a story. So in the previous version, the stories were in the book. But in the current version, the new one that was just released, the stories are in the booster cards. After they have completed a booster card, it'll tell you down here when to read the booster books. So they're totally independent of each other. So like after they get to this certain point, they'll read these triangles and then they're going to read this book here. Here's a few other differences I wanted to point out. And I'm sorry, I unbound these without thinking about it. So these lists were really common in the previous version, and there's not as many of them in the newer version. In fact, this is like one of the few that are in here. There's a lot more artwork, and there's a lot more geography in the newer version as well. See this here. I have to say that the new edition has a lot more hands-on in different ways. Like we had to cut out these houses and glue them and color a picture. These sheep escape in different lessons and you have to kind of tap them and get them back in their pen. And the spelling is just practiced every single day in different ways. And then it also will have you go to the spelling wheel and practice the spelling more. In the previous version, that was the new edition. In the previous version, there was just a lot more word lists that my son would just melt down on. So, and I didn't feel like there was quite as much hands-on practice in this older unit. But maybe that's just me. So here's an example of they don't have things like this anymore where there's just a ton of words in the newer edition. So it's much easier for kids, I feel like, to not get overwhelmed. So these are both lesson 78. This is the new version. This is the previous version. They do not cover the same phonics principles because the books do not correspond with each other in lesson progression. So this is where you talk about the booster cards and apps. You're going to practice this sound, and you're going to dictate the words they tell you down here. You practice compound words. You get to watch a video on the app to explain the softy E, and then they get to do this little activity. After that, there's this independent practice. I think it brings in more reading and geography in here. Just kind of fun. Here's where they practice their spelling words and some more art. And then you're going to finish up by reading. So that is lesson 78 in the new current 2022 version. This is lesson 78 in the previous version. There's phonics cards. You're going to practice this vowel sound by reading these words, which, by the way, may or may not actually make this sound. Sometimes they throw exceptions in here. The kids are going to read this. They're going to read a story out of the reader, and then they're going to write 4 different sentences with these words. I don't feel like this is something a first grader would necessarily be able to do. So that's what I meant by more challenging, because that's not necessarily a first grade thing. They're both wonderful versions. I've used them both. I just feel like the new one is amazing. Not to be biased or anything, but I think it's amazing. And I think that you'll be much more pleased with this, especially if you have used their previous versions and you struggled. You felt like it jumped around too much. You felt like maybe it introduced things that they hadn't learned. I think you'll be more pleased with the new current versions than in the previous ones. I hope that review was helpful. I hope that you could see everything. And if you have any questions, message me, leave a comment, let me know. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Over the next few weeks, I'm going to be sharing my kids' grade level picks for the 2022-2023 school year, and some things we're doing as a family as well. So can't wait to see you. Bye.